بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين. Welcome my students to the, I think, 10th week, which is lecture number 19, if I'm not mistaken. Today, as you see, we are having Whitman, a very prominent poet, a 19th century American poet. We are leaving Edgar Allan Poe with the mystery, and we are approaching today, the voice of America, Whitman. Walt Whitman, as you see, he's like the saga of, the American. It's just like certain bibliographical, so I know the presenters might say this, but as you see, he was born in 1819 on the South Huntington, Long Island, in New York. He was almost entirely self-educated. So if we are talking about a self-made man, like you can say, this is, Whitman. He was self-educated. He didn't go to the university. He didn't go to college. He left school when he was 11 years old. He was a good reader. He read Dante, Shakespeare, Homer, and others. His mother described him as a very good but very strange, like he had some whimsical behaviors. His brother described him as being stubborn, than a load of bricks, like he was stubborn. And I don't know, it's good to be stubborn or not. He was apprenticed as a printer, and I think this made him close to edition and art. Taught, school at 17, like when he was young. He taught, he became, worked as a teacher. So it's very important to look at how many jobs he, assumed. And this gives him experience and even wide knowledge, of what was going around him. He worked as the editor of the Brooklyn Eagle, a respected newspaper, but he was fired for his outspoken opposition to slavery, and he was fired because of the publication of The Leaves of Grass, the poem or the volume we're going to talk about in this short presentation. During the Civil War, he was a nurse. He was addressing the wounds of the wounded soldier. Whitman declared his poetry would have, long lines that captured the rhythm of natural speech, like the natural speech, the spoken speech. Like he didn't want to use traditional poetry. He wanted to use everyday language. So this has to do with a sense of freedom. He didn't want his poetry to restrict him. He wanted free expression without any limitation, without any sophistication. A free verse, not controlled by rhyme. There was rhythm. Yes?
He was the father.
Yes. Many poets imitated him later. His vocabulary was drawn from everyday speech. He was not using poetic diction, diction exclusive to poetry. A base in reality, not morality. He, was a real. He was, basing his poetry in reality. Now, The Leaves of Grass, in fact, this is, an interesting, you cannot understand Whitman's mentality, Whitman's mindset without, understanding The Leaves of Grass. We're not studying The Leaves of Grass, but we are studying perhaps the middle of the volume, which is A Song of Myself. The Leaves of Grass, is meant to be, by Whitman, the first American epic. It is a volume of poetry which has many parts, and this is meant to be like a lesson for any reader who would read it. Like if you want to learn the lesson of democracy, if you want to live American, if you want to free yourself from the limitations of the past and to prepare yourself for the American experience of democracy, it's very important that you read The Leaves of Grass. So the first version, it's very important to see how this Leaves of Grass, it was edited 9 times during his lifetime. And yesterday I watched a video, like after 150 years, like the leaves of grass are still growing. And I don't know, is it right? Like, how come?
Metaphorically.
Huh?
Metaphorically growing.
It is metaphorically growth. Okay, the leaves of grass was the largest symbol. I mean, the leaves were very symbolic. They meant the American individuals. So are they, the leaves of grass as a poetry, it is growing like the way we are interpreting it. But if, you look how the Americans are still living up the spirit of Whitman, you realize how this volume of poetry keeps regenerating itself as the author meant it. So most of the American have this self-reliance. Most of the American believe in the freedom of expression. Most of the American do not want to stay imprisoned or incarcerated within the limitations of the past, within the restrictions of the original sin, because this volume, right from the very beginning, the American individual is emancipated, is freed from this guilt, and it is towards the middle, which is the Song of Myself, the individual achieved selfhood. But the individual is born like reborn. And he started to sing of himself, this is very affirmative. Like when I say, I celebrate myself. And in fact, you have the right, everybody has the right to celebrate himself. Now, it's very important question to ask, what Whitman celebrated himself for? And again, I assign you, perhaps this is a very creative response, what should you celebrate yourself for? This is instead of writing the whole report for next week. What should you celebrate yourself for? What do you think? Why are you so great? It's very affirmative way.
Like bragging.
Yeah, it's not bragging. I don't think you have to be realistic. Of course, now, as I told you, towards the middle of the volume, the Song of Myself, the heroic quest starts, the heroic quest for freedom. Now, when you are away from all these restraints, you can start your heroic quest. Now, the heroic quest was for selfhood, independence, freedom of speech, all these democratizing values. So you could say that Whitman was trying in this song to democratize the American. So he was expecting anybody who would read the volume would start to believe in democracy. So you cannot believe in democracy until you read this. Towards as I said, in the middle, the American individual is reborn. Reborn, not believing in the baseness of the body, because in religion, the body was perceived as a base, as something dirty. Now, here, he says, I'm the poet of the body, and I'm the poet of the soul. So both of them are equal. And we discussed this, or we kept how this is symbolic, like the body, materialism, and the soul, it is spiritualism. Because And these are the roots of the American dream, if you remember. Like when the Puritans came, they came with this dream of establishing this millenarian state or the city on the hill. Okay. Emerson praised Whitman's poetry as the most extraordinary piece of wit. It was like Whitman was the model. He was trying to speculate when he wrote Nature. He praised Whitman as the most extraordinary piece of wit and wisdom that America has yet to contribute. Whitman used these words written by Emerson in a letter to Whitman in a later introduction to Leaves of Grass. Emerson was not amused. John Whittier threw his copy of the book into the fireplace. Like there was some people praised it. Some of his critics, detractors, did not praise it. Another critic dismissed it as just barbaric yawp. Longfellow, Holmes, and Lowell were equally unimpressed. Even Thoreau was appalled by Whitman's poetry, and that was certainly not conformist. So, like, some people admired, and some dismissed him like banal, not very good. You know what? Because he spoke, like there is some erotic element in his poetry. And I think that's why he's dismissed. But those perhaps fail to see the symbolic, the allegorical thing behind, like talking about these things. So it's not a matter of talking about explicitly about this, but rather metaphorically, how to free man from the fear of the past, from the fear of the guilt, from the fear of the body itself as a place of guilt. So, and all of these would be understood within the nature of democracy. Like democracy needs adhesiveness. Like how solidarity, like people, how can they be together? By being adhesive, by being close together. Okay. What's his ideal? His lack of regular rhyme and meter, free verse, non-traditional. This is his ideal of poetry. Poetic style, the subject matter shocked more traditional writers. His subject matter, the motifs, the rebirth, the sexuality, they shocked, some writers. He also wrote poetry with unabashedly sexual imagery and themes, some of them homoerotic. Examples include the Calamus poems, which is, in the volume The Leaves of Grass. But I said this is in the context of changing the perception about the body. It's allegorical. It doesn't have to do with like literal meaning of sexuality. Whitman was patriotic, was very patriotic. He, as I said, he was a nurse during the war. He was shocked when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. He was shocked with the death of the soldiers. And this poem, which is like very famous elegy, When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloomed. It's an elegy written to elegize the death or the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, who was assassinated by a Southern colonel, Boots, his name. He was watching a play in a theater. The background of the Civil War. The Civil War started because Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. The Southern people who were slaveholders rejected that, and there was a severe civil war which lasted for 3 years, and it was very horrific. Like the Southern people wanted to take the prisoner as a hostage in order to exchange prisoners. But the last thing they did, they assassinated him while he was watching a play. He was assassinated in a theater, by the way. So this poem, like if you want to know more about this, he was praising, "O captain," the one who was like a captain of the ship. So America was like a ship, which, was anchored like in a safe place, even though the captain, died. It's very, breath taking, poem, and it's a very sad one. He wrote,
Abraham Lincoln.
yes, he was mourning Abraham Lincoln. Also, he wrote, a poem, as I said, this is like my captain, okay? The lyrics was about the soldiers who were dying. When lilacs last in the door bloomed, it's elegy written, after Lincoln's assassination, and it was showing how death is life. Like how those people will be regenerated by their ideas. Their sacrifice will not be in vain. Okay? Okay, I don't want to compare him with Dickinson, but I want to say a couple of words about, Whitman's style. Whitman's, I would say, was very good at bringing together the contradictions. He was and this is perhaps when we touch upon Taylor was using the metaphysical style. Here, we have a poet who wanted to capture the spirit of America. America was full of discrepancies, contradictions. So he said, I contradict myself, and I contradict myself, but I include the whole multitudes. So when you contradict yourself, it's not a problem, because you, at the end of the day, you are the crucible which contains all these contradictions. So he assumed himself as the leader, but he's the leader, by using his poetics. There was an article which says, Abraham Lincoln united America by his politics, and Whitman united America by his poetics. So when you have a poet who says, I sing, of the slave, and I sing of the master, of the slave. I'm the poet of the slave, and I'm the poet of the master of the slave. I'm the poet of the body, and I'm the poet of the soul. I'm the poet of the man, and I'm the poet of the woman. I'm the poet. So he was singing America. He was singing America. He was assuming the voice of every American. This is very democratizing. I think we, the Palestinians, we need somebody who would include in his voice all the voices. You see, this is what the Palestinians need nowadays. They need a Whitmanian character who would speak on behalf of everybody, who would see the contradiction as a sign of beauty rather than a sign of ugliness. So you have a poet who, by his poetics, succeeded in uniting all Americans. Like we said, he was good at reconciling the contradictory things. So we expect that he was using a lot of paradoxes. I celebrate myself, and I celebrate you as well as I celebrate myself. When I celebrate myself, I celebrate the others, because what I assume, you assume. So here, bringing together the individual with the community is, yes.
And maybe this is why his Leaves of Grass is still growing, because everyone read his poem, he just identify with an angle, because he speaks for all voices. So
Yes.
this is how he still remains until nowadays.
Yes, it's very good to find a poet who would do like this. But what characterizes his poetry also, now we don't have rhyme, we have meter, but this meter is not regular meter. We have rhythm. The rhythm of the ideas, the rhythm of the images. We have repetition in his poetry, much repetition. And this repetition is caused by anaphora. Like, what is anaphora? Like repeating, you know. He used what is called listing or cataloging. These are Whitmanian, this is Whitman style. And you find him like he was talking direct to the people. He was not very artificial. He didn't want to be like different. Like, he wanted to be one of the multitude. So the paradox is like how he was a poet. He saw himself as a seer. At the same time, he was talking on behalf of the people. Yes?
I think that's why he used everyday language, to be closer to the people, to let
Yes.
everyone understand him.
So you have a romantic poet, but different from Wordsworth. Wordsworth had an eye on rhyme and rhythm. He built on traditions of poetry, but here we have a poet who started free poetry to suit the spirit of like the burgeoning America. You know what I mean? Burgeoning, like the still young America, which was still growing. So America was as young as Whitman. Whitman started writing when he was like at the age of 30. So a lot of Americans think that he is like the poet, like he's a 19th century, but still like he is famous until now, and his leaves of grass are still growing. I thought this introduction would be important before the presenters come here and talk about two poems, I think. One poem only. Which one? Goodbye to My Fancy. Okay. What about like I learned the astronomer one? Okay, we can do it, after you do it. Let me do the astronomer.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nusayb Al-Yazji, and I will present it today Walt Whitman. Goodbye, My Fancy. The outline are the author, his life, technique, language, and themes. Poem recitation, the analysis, and American characteristic. After the teacher said about his life and autobiography, so we'll begin by the poem. Actually, I didn't find a good recitation for the poem, so I will read it by myself. Goodbye, my fancy. Farewell, dear mate, dear love. I'm going away, I know not where, or to what fortune, or whether I may ever see you again. So goodbye, my fancy. Now for my last, let me look back a moment. The slower, fainter ticking of the clock is in me. Exit, nightfall, and soon the heart thud stopping. Long have we lived, joyed, kissed together, delightful. Now separation. Goodbye, my fancy. Yet let me not be too hasty. Long indeed have we lived, slept, flittered, become really blended into one. Then, if we die together. Yes, we'll remain one. If we go anywhere, we'll go together to meet what happens. Maybe we'll be better off and blither and learn something. Maybe it's yourself now really ushering me to the true songs. Who knows? Maybe it's you, the mortal knob, really undoing, turning. So finally, goodbye and hail my fancy. So the poet starts his poem by saying that he is by saying that he doesn't know how much longer he can live, or or where he will be next. As we see in the Whitman style, he used the catalogs and anaphora, which is initial repetition. He uses cheerful words like dear, fancy, to show that he is not concerned with that farewell, and he addressing the audience as his love to enhance the intimacy, relationship, and friendship. This stanza, next stanza, the poem, we see the poem begins to become emotional, emphasizes on the little time he has, and he can feel his death coming soon. Thinking of the clock is in me, it's a metonymy for his heart. Then in this line he addresses the good time he had with his readers. He admires the relationship between him and his readers, but he knows it is time to move on. He uses the catalogs: lived, joyed, cares, we lived, slept, fluttered. Then if we die together. If we go anywhere, we'll go together to meet what happens. Maybe we'll be better off and blither and learn something. Whitman connects the reader and says that they are one. He doesn't want his lover to feel like he is trying to leave quickly, and reminds them how much time they spend together. And he wants his reader to continue to learn from him and inspired by him after his death, as if he trying to monumentalize himself in this. And maybe it is yourself now really ushering me through songs. Who knows? Questions he asks, wondering to the. Maybe it is you, the mortal knob. Mortal knob, it is a symbolize for his reader that opens the door to his death, and he become more softer compared to his other poem, and which emphasize on his wisdom and greatness. He seems to be relaxed and at peace while saying goodbye. And this poem ends his legacy with dignity and pride. About the American features, we can say it's about transcendentalism. He tries to create that utopian life with his friends and his readers. Symbolism, he used symbolism in the poem. Individualism, we see how he depends on himself and saying about himself. Self-reliance. We saw how he create his style and his use of free verse. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. You know, the poem ends in a paradoxical manner. Goodbye and hail my fancy. What does he mean by goodbye and hail? Goodbye and hail. Goodbye and welcome. So don't you think this is very symbolic? Paradoxical, but at the same time it is symbolic. Now, I think, we have to go back to see the symbolism in this poem, like goodbye to my fancy. Like, it's, how many speakers do you have here? Like, if you, 2 speakers. Like the persona, like the one who says goodbye to my fancy and my fancy. So, whom do you imagine like the speaker is? Like, who's this persona? Goodbye to my fancy. Huh? Whitman himself.
Oh, the body.
The body or the soul?
The body.
How do you know?
When he says I'm going away, I know what way. This is the first of the body.
Yeah, when we die, which part of us starts the journey?
The soul.
The soul. So is this the soul addressing the body? What is the mortal knob?
The body.
The body. What does mean knob? We see the knob of the door. It's the knob. It's the handle which makes you open. So what is he talking? This is very symbolic. What does like mean?
The soul is opening the door for the body to
The body is opening.
the soul for the
The soul is opening, or the body is opening the. Okay, it's the mortal knob. So it is the body which opens the door for the soul.
It's even the end is a symbol for a new
So look here how the body is very important. The body, ushers it to come in. Without the body, it would be impossible for the soul. Look how importance he's giving for the body. So without the body, there will be no salvation. Without the body, this contradicts with the early Puritan beliefs about the body, about even in, certain dogmas, the body is seen as base, as we said in the introduction. So this is a kind of dialogue. It's very dramatic. Goodbye, farewell, dear mate, dear love. Like the body and the soul are intimate, like through our life, we see how much like they are close together. Dear mate, farewell, dear mate, dear love. Mate and love, it's repetition. I'm going away, I know not where. So again, this is perhaps is a little bit dubious about Christianity, like the notion of heaven. I'm going away, I know not where, or to what fortune, or whether I may ever see you again. Starts, okay, so goodbye my fancy. Now for my last, let me look back a moment. Like this is his first perception, or his first thought that they would never, he doesn't know whether they are going to meet. But on a second thought, after meditation, after like this transcendentalist moment, he started to change his view. And he said, goodbye. Now for my last, let me look back a moment. The slower, fainter ticking of the clock is in me. I mean, like it's like a moment of dying. Exit, nightfall, and soon the heart stopped. If I leave, what happens to the body? It becomes dark. Exit, nightfall, and soon the heart thud stopping. Okay? I just want to go. Huh? Long have we lived, joyed, cares together. Delightful. Now separation. Come on. How separation is delightful? It's an oxymoron. Delightful separation. Now separation. Goodbye, my fancy. Yet let me not be too hasty. Long indeed we lived, slept, filter, become really blended into one. If we are talking metaphorically or allegorically about the body and the soul, now the two things that were dividing the American society during Whitman's time, during the 19th century, in fact, were materialism and spiritualism. And perhaps the Civil War itself, which most of the historians say it started because of the issue of slavery, but the hidden episteme perhaps was different, because the North was industrial, the South was agrarian, so it was a kind of clash in interest, like the Northern people wanted to sell their machines, the Southern people wanted to keep their slaves. So this is another reason why, like the war started, the Civil War. And here you have a poet who is equally showing how the body and the soul are important.
So the body could be
I mean, yes, materialism and like spiritualism are integrated, they are intimate to each other. So don't you think this is very democratizing? Don't you think this is a great reconciler? Okay? Yes, he assumes or subsumes all the voices in his voice, yet the great paradox, like every individual is free. Okay, he speaks on behalf of them, yet each individual has his own voice. Then if we die together. Yes, we will remain one. Okay, so if we die, we're going to die. now he changed his mind, like it's not death. If we die, we're going to die together. We are doomed to live and die together. So if we die, yes, unity. Then if we go anywhere, we'll go together to meet what happens. Maybe we will better off and blither and learn something. Okay? So he thinks that the journey will be together. And this is very important because it shows how the body is indispensable for the sublimity of the soul. It is indispensable for the notion of salvation, which contradicts with traditional Christianity. Maybe it is you yourself now really ushering me. It is you, the body, which was perceived as base, as mundane, which ushering me through songs. Who knows? Maybe it is you, the mortal knob, really undoing, turning. So now, finally, goodbye and hail my fancy. It's very intimate, very dramatic poem, but as we said, it has this spoken language. The poetics of Whitman, poetry is the poetics of symbolism, is the poetics of idea, is the poetics of repetition, is the poetics of assuming, like expressing himself in everyday language. I think we still have time for the astronomer, which unfortunately nobody got ready to present. I don't know why they were not assigned this. Let's see the second poem. When I heard the learned astronomer. How did you find this poem, by the way? For those who read the poem.
Sounds like a scientific one. Yes.
It
sounds like a scientific book.
Yes, sir.
It sounds like a scientific.
Figures, we have charts, diagrams.
And I wonder how he is using the everyday language and using terms like astronomer.
Okay.
It's not like discovery.
Intellectual. Good.
It's full of transcendentalism.
Full of transcendentalism. Okay, you have not read the poem. This is what I understood from your response. Thank you very much. Okay, when I heard the astronomer, let me, read it. When I heard the astronomer, when I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and the diagrams to add, divide, measure them, when I sitting heard the astronomer, we lectured with much applause in the lecture room, how soon, unaccountable, I became tired and sick. Till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself in the mystical moist air, night air, and from time to time looked up in perfect silence at the stars.
Meditation.
Huh?
Meditation.
Yes, meditation. It's very, a wonderful poem. I think it doesn't need much effort to understand what the poet is up to. Here, yes, you have a transcendental poet. But we learn, before going through the poem, what do you learn from this? What do you learn from this? What do you learn from this? Huh? Yeah, the poem.
Learn from nature.
What I learned that Whitman has a very good noticing how he can express such scientific aspect of the life in such beautiful language.
Yeah, but is he in
This field
the fashion of listening to this? Is he in the mood of listening to this? He's sick and tired. He doesn't like this, He doesn't like to listen to somebody lecturing. He wants to gain his own knowledge. He wants, he's an individual, so we have this self-reliance. Okay, the astronomer can talk about figures, about this, But for me, this is very sickening. I have to go through the experience myself. I have the imagination. I have my own way of experiencing like this. Okay, this is something which he didn't dismiss, but it's not his own style. It's not his own way of living. He
Also, he's against limitation and restriction.
Yes.
He said measuring and ceaseless oceans. So he's like want a vast thing.
Yeah.
And he started with learn as an astronomer and then conclude his poem with the stars. So he wanted to learn it from the nature itself, but not from the learned astronomer.
Yeah. He wanted to get first-hand experience. Okay.
When he said, he's the learned astronomer, someone educated him, not like himself.
They learned. Yeah, he's like, and I think he's a little bit sarcastic. Don't you think so?
Because he is self-educated.
Okay. Let's see. How do you feel like the tone here, of the lines? When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged. There is monotony. Like there is a kind of monotony. Like the way the lines are, the lines are arranged, the way the lines are read. Like look, when I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, like the students when like a teacher like me lecturing, and when the students are not prepared by the way, and the teacher talks about things like the students become sleepy. Okay, so when I heard, what does hear mean? Like, why didn't he use the word listen? Yeah, it shows his difference. What I heard. This is the choice of the words. When I heard. When I listened, it shows like he was coming to listen. But here, it shows how he indifferent was to this kind of knowledge. But this contradicts with what we said at the beginning, because he was singing America. He was singing the astronomer, the engineer, the carpenter, the driver, the captain, But here, he is like explaining about his own mood of, seeing things, his own experience. When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, look at the syntax here. Like the syntax, we started by what is called the subordinate clause. And we have to wait until the main clause comes. When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before me, when I was shown, look at the passive. When I was shown.
Everything is acted upon.
Yeah, he doesn't like to be acted upon. He wants like to be the initiator. And this is like Whitman, the man who was full of energy. When I heard the astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and the diagrams to add, divide, and measure them, when I sitting, like again look here, the passive is gradually like departing. When I sitting heard the astronomer where he lectured with applause in the lecture room, again there is like criticism of people sentimental taste. Yes. How soon unaccountable I became. Unaccountable. It's how soon accountable I became. This is the main clause. Till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself. I wandered like, I wandered off by myself. It's the beginning of, like, I wandered lonely as a cloud. It's similar to Wordsworth. I wandered by myself in the mystical, moist night air. It's mysticism. It's a sort of mysticism. And from time to time, looked up in the perfect silence at the stars. Look here. The eye, the isolated, the lonely eye, is merging with nature. And this is like very romantic, very transcendental. It's like I visited some sites in the internet. They're showing how Whitman was bringing nature to life by his poetry. You see how he was applying whatever argument Emerson brought.
So this is again and into nature.
No, come on.
So it's materialistic and
Yes. So this is the point. Yes, we have. I mean, Whitman here is trying to fix every possible weakness in the American society. Yes, Whitman was trying to bring together, like all the Americans, regardless of their differences, regardless of their contradictions. So it was very important. Yes.
Foundation of democracy.
Yes. And I think, The Leaves of Grass is an epic. It's the first epic. And if you look, like somebody say, okay, the leaves of grass, look at America now, it's growing. These are the leaves of grass. This is like Whitman is living among them. I think this is enough fair introduction to Whitman. But we have to look closely at his poetic devices, at his poetic techniques. And I expect this to be in the coming lecture, when we talk about a Song of Myself. Okay? That's enough for today. Thank you very much for listening. And, in a short time, I'll be giving you your reflection. Okay? And next time, inshallah, we'll do a Song of Myself.